Is a shelter-in-place order coming to New York City? Will it be followed with different orders like it in cities and perhaps towns across the country? Plus, how is this economic rescue package coming along? Is the Department of Defense going to be called in? And I've got at least one idea to try to help ease this period for folks who are on the front lines. We got that and more coming up on the Buck Sexton Show. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining me during what is clearly a very challenging time in this country. We are in the midst of a pandemic, or at least pandemic preparations, the likes of which we have never seen before. Understandably, people are deeply, deeply concerned about this. I don't think the word concern even really covers the feeling right now of a lot of folks across the country. And I mean this in all seriousness, so I'm going to try to stay with my overall promise to you that I will limit to the degree that I can unnecessary partisan commentary during the show. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be any, because there's always, and we're going to be in this for months, okay? Meaning that there's going to be this problem, I don't know to what degree, but coronavirus is here for months at a minimum. Maybe not to the same level. We're seeing it now with the different, and we're going to walk through all this together, give you all the latest on everything. But this is a moment in time when we can take a step back and be people first before we are politicos, before we are partisans. There will be some pushback that I'll have to do, and that will even come today against anyone who is lying about the president, trying to make it harder for us, trying to make things more difficult for the president's response team to do everything they're trying to do. But overall, we will be in a position, I think, where we can say, okay, let's focus first here on what's really happening, what we know is going on. You know, I'm here in New York, and we're about to, in the next 24 hours, find out, because de Blasio, the mayor here, has said that it'll be that time period when he determines, in consultation with the state, because really the city doesn't have those full police powers without the state say so, and you know, quarantine powers are very tied into police powers. Public health authorities are at the state level. You know, it's not like a city can decide, oh, we're a corona-free zone, so we'll do whatever we want. But we might have a situation like what they have in San Francisco, where you're just not really allowed to leave your house unless you're considered essential personnel or you're going to get food or medicine. That's it. Forget about social distancing. This is the end of socializing. And I'm going to try to strike as much of a balance as I can as we go through this. I'm hopeful that within a few weeks we will feel much better about this whole situation than we do right now. We'll feel like at least it's somewhat under control. I am hopeful about that. I can't guarantee it, obviously. No one can guarantee much of anything these days. The economy is in a terrifying spot. Now, how frightened should we be of the virus? That really remains to be seen. We have to see what the numbers are. But if the economy stays like this, we've never been through something like this before. This isn't one sector dragging everything down. This isn't one aspect of our fiscal policy that's causing all kinds of problems. We are going to be in for a terrible economic ride here across the board, because we are in the midst of what is effectively a total freeze on the economy. This is going to be rough. The economic side is definitely going to be rough. There's no question about that. And I think that you can even see, and I'm sorry, as I sit here, I'm sometimes force myself to pause because I go, oh, I just touched my face. I can't stop I only do it when I'm home. But when you realize how often you touch your face, then you realize how much more you need to wash your hands. It's tough to escape this stuff. It's with you all the time. It stays in your mind constantly. So to give you a sense of just how bad the circumstances really are right now, you have people who are very quick and have been very quick to be deeply critical of the president on everything. And I would say, in many cases, unfairly critical of the president. You have some of those people coming forward to say, okay, let's actually handle this as adults. And the president's doing a good job. Here is Governor Cuomo of New York, for example. Play clip 3.
This government has done somersaults. It's performed better than ever before. I am telling you, this government cannot meet this crisis without the resources and capacity of the federal government. I spoke to the president this morning again. He is ready, willing, and able to help. I've been speaking with members of his staff late last night, early this morning. We need their help, especially on the hospital capacity issue. We need FEMA. FEMA has tremendous resources. When I was at HUD, I worked with FEMA. I know what they can do. I know what the Army Corps of Engineers can do. They have a capacity that we simply do not have. I said to the president, who is a New Yorker, who I've known for many, many years, I put my hand out in partnership. I want to work together 100%. I need your help. I want your help. And New Yorkers will do everything they can to be good partners with the federal government. I think the president was 100% sincere in saying that he wanted to work together in partnership, in a spirit of cooperation. He has taken evidence that his team has been on it. I know a team when they're on it, and I know a team when they're not on it. His team is on it. They've been responsive late at night, early in the morning, and they've thus far been doing everything that they can do, and I want to say thank you, and I want to say that I appreciate it.
All right. What is he really referring to in terms of the imminent fight ahead? I mean, that's the governor of New York. New York, just because of population density, is now there are the most cases in New York, and we are going to end up having the most fatalities here. And this will also be viewed, I think, as a test case, because if social distancing and the policies that they're putting in place can work here, they can obviously work anywhere. A lot of you listening to this live in parts of the country where there are far fewer cases, there's far less human population density to worry about in the first place. So if it can work in New York, it'll obviously work out in Indiana, Texas, Utah, Minnesota, you name it, right? A lot of places where this will be able to be much more easily, I think, put into effect. It's going to be painful for everybody, but it's more difficult here than it is in other places. So then that brings me to the hospital bed issue. Here's what we're being told. The 15 days to flatten the curve. Everyone's been crunching the numbers on what's happening in Italy, and flatten the curve has become a phrase, almost a rallying cry now for people who want there to be very serious, immediate, severe measures taken to avoid the fate of Italy, which is really what everyone points to right now. And I would note that Spain and France and Germany, not clear how far behind Italy they are. But what happened in Italy was you had too many infections too quickly at the same time, and the hospital system is just overwhelmed, meaning they do not have enough ICU beds. They don't have enough medical practitioners. A lot of their medical practitioners got COVID-19. A lot of them came down with the disease. Wuhan virus. Again, I'm going to call it the different things because there's a lot of things that we can call it. But that's what ended up being the case in Italy, and we can see that and look at the projections of infections there on a time graph, number of infections and number of days that have passed. And we are considered to be about 8 to 10 days right now behind where Italy was before their crisis completely exploded. Or perhaps we're even 8 to 10 days behind Italy, period. I mean, it depends on how you're going to line up the numbers, what part of the north of Italy we're talking about, or if we're just talking about some cities, some sections. So we're not far behind them, and we're trying to make sure that we don't have a situation here where the ICU beds are all full, because then people show up and they say, I can't breathe. If they're in the high-risk population, I'm having trouble breathing. I think I have COVID-19. What can we do about this? And the response will be, we're going to do everything we can, but we don't have. If we take somebody else off a ventilator, that person's going to die. So you get into this really horrible, inhumane, but unavoidable first come, first serve to the ventilator situation, which is terrifying to people. So we are trying to avoid that here, and that's what the flatten the curve mantra is all about. We have efforts being made now to get ahead of this. The Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Defense, the military has an ability to set up field hospitals. That may be happening now. There's a lot of discussion about taking perhaps empty university space, because the universities have all been emptied out across the country pretty much, taking them and setting up additional hospital beds, setting up additional facilities. As I've been saying, this is considered an all hands on deck situation. Now we know that this disease is more dangerous than the flu. It is more severe, and it's very, very highly infectious. SARS years ago was terrifying until we realized that you really weren't able to pass on SARS unless you had the extreme symptoms of SARS. The problem we're having with COVID-19 is that they think now people are, not only do they not know they're infected, but they're spreading the infection while not having any symptoms, which just means that no matter how judicious a person is about public announcements and everything else, unless they social distance, whether they have symptoms or not, they may be spreading the virus to other people. So that's where this is right now. And, then there's the troubling analysis that we saw, that you're seeing probably this morning, about how long this is going to last. I want to get into the timelines a little bit here. And also, just a promise to you, we're going to talk about some other things today. I will always take any suggestions for just either history deep dives or subject matter that you want me to address here on the show, because we're in for a long haul, certainly weeks, maybe months. This story is not going away. Journalists are not chasing anything else. There's not a lot of other information gathering going on out there right now, because this is the single biggest problem facing all of humanity. Not climate change, by the way, but I'll try to keep the climate change snark to a minimum for now. Glad we had the community of world scientists focusing for the last decade on something that's a non-problem, when a problem like this was sneaking up on us and people knew it was just a matter of time. And now here we are facing a depression, and I don't even know how you can describe the disruptions of life that we might be under. This is also where I tell you, we will get through, we will be okay. I'm here for you, you are here for me, and in the end, we're all going to be all right. But it's going to be a rough ride.
I mean, look, this is just coming back to where this conversation started after the press conference. I hear what Sanjay is saying about Tony Fauci giving, a little bit more wiggle room than others. But if you look at the big picture, this was remarkable from the President of the United States. This is a nonpartisan. This is an important thing to note and to applaud from an American standpoint, from a human standpoint. He is being the kind of leader that people need, at least in tone today and yesterday, in tone that people need and want and yearn for in times of crisis and uncertainty.
When a CNN political analyst, that was Donna Bash at CNN, is saying the president's leadership is needed right now and he's doing a good job, and I mean this in all honesty, it's serious. I haven't heard anything like that from anybody who works for that news organization in over 3 years. I've heard a completely consistent stream of the exact opposite, actually, that President Trump was a traitor and horrible and ruining the country and a threat to democracy. And now we see what is effectively a threat to humanity. And it does remind us all of what a bunch of petty nonsense the country was put through for years. We could have been focusing on real problems, real challenges, things like infectious disease, dealing with poverty, dealing with upward mobility. We could have done that. That could have been where the media's attention was. But no, instead, it was just a steady stream of Trump hatred. They do bear responsibility, not just for crying wolf, which certainly slowed some of the recognition that the country had about the severity of this, because the media says everything Trump does is horrible. And they say any challenge that Trump faces, he's not up to. So that affected the analysis that many of us did on whether or not this should be taken as the pandemic, or expected to be the pandemic that it is. And then you also have the reality of the media using its focus of the public's attention, which does direct things like resources, which does have real effects. That focus of the public's attention that could have been put to productive use, but instead was put to anti-Trump derangement purposes that were a complete waste of everybody's time. A total, utter, shocking waste. And it's appalling. And they've abdicated the responsibility they have to the American people. Now, all right, I'm getting a little more political than I meant to, but I do have to. I also want to say, thank you to Donna Bash for, I know it's spelled Dana, but it actually is pronounced Donna. Thank you to Donna Bash for being honest about the situation. People need honesty right now. We need truth. We don't need partisan hacks. We don't need people that are trying to score cheap points. And this is why, I know for some of you it's like nails on a chalkboard, but when I play the Cuomo audio for you in New York, when I've played Newsom saying that Trump's administration's been really helpful, I think it's necessary that we encourage truth-telling from all sides and from anybody right now. And to the degree that we can, put partisanship aside. So I mentioned the fight to get enough beds in place. And we're going to know really quickly if their projections and everything that we're being told about this are true. We're going to know in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to know if what they've been saying about how desperately we need to stop the spread of this is accurate. So, meaning, and that the numbers that they're projecting, are they coming true? Because we're doing all this, and we're going to extremes here. We're effectively shutting down our economy in order to stop what they say is the curve, or stop the spike and flatten the curve. There are some challenges that comes with that are not even really thought through, I think, at this point. One of them being that eventually people are just going to non-comply. And the state's going to have a very hard time telling people that you don't get to live your life when you have a 99% chance. This is just reality. I'm just saying it. You don't get to live your life because there's a 99% chance you'll be okay, but there are other people who won't be. Eventually people are going to say, I'm going to take the risk. That's what's going to. So we'll get into this, and this is setting up something of an intergenerational tension that everyone's picking up on right now as well. But the fight over beds and preparation for the spike that is right now, you have to remember we are up 10 times in a week nationwide, the cases here. We will be up 5 to 10 times the number of cases next week. As more testing happens, more cases will appear, and as more cases appear, there'll be greater anxiety about just how widespread this disease really is. So we have to focus right now on that 15-day, now 13-day period that the president has been talking about. Now, this is where I have to take a moment to tell you that sometimes the press are, in fact, the enemies of the people. That's a real thing. Some journalists right now are doing excellent work, and we need them to be bringing us facts and stories. So I'm not using this as an opportunity to besmirch all journalists. Far from it. I work in the media, so I'm in some ways part of the extended journalist family, I guess. But the New York Times went with a story right now when people are at this degree of extreme unease. And remember, panic, the word that I don't know if I've explained on this show, interesting derivation of it, comes from the Greek god of the woods, Pan, who had the legs of a goat and little horns and played a flute. People know the Pan flute. Panic is comes from panikos in ancient Greece, which was the feeling you had if you were in the woods. And they're not sure if you saw Pan because it was a terrifying and scary situation, or if you're just in Pan's realm, the woods, away from civilization, away from your family and your protectors, and so you have extreme anxiety that comes on. That's where the word panic comes from, which I think is interesting because you're hearing it constantly right now. But we are in this moment in time where things are particularly uneasy. I think that's a gentle way of saying it. And I'm right in the middle of it. I mean, I am doing the show right now from Midtown Manhattan. Well, I could walk over to Times Square in a matter of minutes and it would be empty. It looks like that scene from Vanilla Sky, one of my least favorite movies of all time, by the way. I put Vanilla Sky in the 10 worst movies I've ever seen, maybe even the 5 worst movies I've ever seen in the theater. It was god-awful. But there's a scene where Times Square is completely empty, and it's like a dream sequence. It's like that right now. I mean, you might see a handful of people walking around, but usually you would see hundreds, maybe 1,000 or two, right? You'd see a lot of people in Times Square, and it's not because people are scared. So we're trying to get ready for the influx that is, according to all experts. I don't know an expert who disagrees with this. I haven't seen one, I should say. The influx of people who are infected with COVID-19 and are having trouble breathing, and they go to the hospital and they need really serious help. And it's not like they go in, they get patched up, and they're out in a day. They're going to be on ventilators for a couple of weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks. So each ventilator that someone gets on is taken offline for a long period of time. And the president was on a conference call with governors from around the nation, and this is what the New York Times reported. Trump to governors on ventilators, try getting it yourselves. And people were reporting this as, wow, how could he? Oh, he's so awful. Respirators, ventilators, all the equipment, try getting it yourselves. And there were people, the New York Times, who were sharing this like this was an appalling thing for the president to say. Well, he also said, the full quote is, we will be backing you, but try getting it yourselves. Point of sales, much better, much more direct if you can get it yourself. This was treated as yet another moment to criticize the president, when all he's saying is, do everything you can. I mean, the federal government's going to help you as much as it can, but guess what? The federal government's not perfect, doesn't have all the resources it needs right now, because it just draws upon the resources of the people. We weren't ready for this. We're not really prepared for this. So if the states have a better way of getting some of this, they should just do it. You know, if you see something on Amazon, are you going to wait for the state authorities to deliver to your door? Or are you just going to say, I'm going to buy that? That's all he's saying. And it was reported on as the president's being, unfeeling, and he doesn't care, and, all this other stuff. Just pure and utter garbage. And the president notably annoyed by this. Play clip 12.
And yesterday I gave the governors the right to go order directly if they want, if they feel they can do it faster than going through the federal government. Now, we've knocked out all of the bureaucracy. It's very direct, but it's still always faster to order directly. And I gave them. That was totally misinterpreted by the New York Times on purpose, unfortunately. But
yeah, they did completely misinterpret it, and they used it as a cheap shot opportunity against the president. And it's really appalling. But that's where we are, and that's still going to continue to happen. People view all of this as an opportunity to score political points against an administration that they hate. That really gave us, the first 3 years of Trump were the 3 best years in this country in my adult life. I honestly believe that. I knew it wasn't going to last. I knew we were going to have a war or something. I didn't know it was going to be this. We're going to have a massive recession. We're going to have some problem that came up. Have a socialist takeover of the country. That was a concern. It looks like that's not going to happen. Biden crushed Bernie last night in the primaries. Here we are. Biden's going to be too old for the job, not very bright, not very impressive. Biden is supposed to be the savior of the country. We'll get to that later. Let's focus on what's going on right here, right now. So you've got, just by the numbers, so I can really make it clear to you why there's such a concern right now over hospital beds. You've got over 180,000 people across the world who are confirmed to have COVID-19, and you have at least Wuhan virus. By the way, please don't tell me to call it one thing. There's a lot of things people are calling it. I'm not calling it Wuhan virus because it's just COVID-19 is easier to say. But you've got at least 7,000 deaths around the world. It's going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot more than that. And now, a bad flu season will kill 60,000 to 80,000 people in the United States alone. So that's real. But this is different and worse than the flu. We're there. I was really hoping that was not going to be the case. I was really hoping we could sit here and just say it's just the flu part 2, but it's not. No one now who studies this, no one now who looks at this is claiming otherwise. So, this is where we get to the shelter-in-place declaration that looks like it's already happened in San Francisco. It looks like it may happen here in New York City. New York State has 1,700 cases. And I know you guys live in different states, but this is now going to be the test case for because we're going to have the most people confirmed to have the disease, and you're going to see the greatest influx of resources probably in the hospital system here because it's going to need it. 1,700 cases, probably by the end of the day, it'll be closer to 2,000. Almost 1,000 cases in New York City alone. And a rough estimate is that whatever we think the number is, it's 10 times that number. So if we think there are 1,000 cases in New York City, there are 10,000 cases in New York City. If there are 10,000 cases in New York City, meaning people that actually have the disease, a lot of them don't know it. Most of them don't know it. They're walking around, they're infecting people. Now, there's 8 million people, 8.5 or so million people in New York, which means that obviously a lot of people don't have it, but 10,000, if you spread it to 2 people at a time, and they spread it to 2 people, and they spread it to 2 people, exponential growth means that you're going to have roughly half the city in a pretty short order of time that has this. That's what would happen if you just allowed people to go about their lives and do everything. So we are hoping to bring down that number so that there are enough beds, because when we get to 10 or 15,000 people who are hospitalized with this, which will happen relatively quickly based on the numbers we're already seeing, there need to be the resources in place to treat them. So we are right now waiting for the onslaught. I mean, this is a little bit like we're in the front line of an infantry battle. You know, we're in the front line of the phalanx, and we can see the enemy coming over the crest of the hill across from us. And it is big, and it is a scary-looking enemy. And we have to just sort of wait for it. You know, I've been talking to friends about how the city after 9/11, we were scared, but we also knew right away, many of us, I think, had a change in mentality to, okay, now this means war. And when you're fighting against a human enemy, no matter how terrifying their tactics and how evil they may be, as Al-Qaeda was and is, you know that they're vulnerable. I mean, to borrow from Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Predator movie, if it bleeds, we can kill it. Right? It's one of his better lines than what is, I think, arguably one of the 5 greatest action movies of all time, if not number 1. If it bleeds, we can kill it. Human beings bleed, so we know that we can take out any human enemy if we just have the skill, the grit, the determination. Viruses don't bleed. Now, they can die, but we can't go really and seek them out to eradicate them. We are playing defense. We are on defense inherently when we're dealing with a viral pandemic like this. And that feels bad. That feels even more uneasy in a lot of ways. There's not going to be any revenge here. There's not going to be any justice. No one's ever going to, kick in bin Laden's front door and shoot him in the face because he gave us a virus, right? I mean, there's never going to... Yeah, I'm going to talk about the situation with China, which is complicated and really bad, but there's no one person you're going to be able to point to and say is responsible for this, and even trying to hold one nation state responsible will be a very difficult thing, and what would that even mean? Because it's really the regime, it's the Chinese Communist Party that you would blame for this. It's not the people of China. And we have the same issue with Iran. It's the Iranian regime that is our enemy. Iran's dealing with a terrible outbreak there. It's not the Iranian people that are our enemy. So we are at this point in time when we just have to do everything that we can, make all the preparations possible. For those of you that are fans of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, this is the viral pandemic equivalent of Helm's Deep. And we are just trying to put a sword in everybody's hand who can swing one and hunker down and get ready for it. Because that's it's about to hit us. It's about to hit us really hard. Those of you that are still skeptics, I think there are very few of them now, but there are some who listen to this who I know are still skeptical of how serious this is going to be. We can sacrifice 2 weeks of economic activity and all this. We can sacrifice 2 weeks in order to find out if the projections of the experts are right. We can't take a gamble and assume the experts are wrong and let this thing go on without these measures for another 2 to 3 weeks. That's the truth. That's where we are. One of them we can recover from. The other one is catastrophic. And think about what a great day it would be if I have to sit here and, I'll be laughing and slapping high fives with producer Mark, and man, they were crazy. They were way off. Samsonite, they were way off. But I think that's a 1% chance at this point. I could be wrong, but I haven't seen a single expert make a case that we're not about to see a big surge. Now, there are some variables. I want to give you some positive notes here, because I know on the Drudge Report there's this get ready for 18 months of social distancing story. I saw that too. I read the whole thing. I'm reading the catastrophists, and I'm reading the slightly less catastrophist, because that's really all there is these days, versions of events. But I want to give you some of the possible positives here and some of the upside, and then we'll talk a bit about also the generational issue. In fact, maybe I'll do the generational issue first, because that's going to play a very large role in how the fight against Wuhan virus, and then we'll get into the situation with China, how we even got here. And I think this is going to play into the long-term relationship between U.S. and China in very troubling ways. If this is as bad as some people are anticipating, there's going to be a backlash against China and the Chinese government from the whole world, but from America in particular, because they are responsible for this situation in many ways.
Now we're going to find out. Everything has a risk. We're going to see. But if people do what we're telling them to do, what we're asking them to do, you're going to see the saving of a lot of lives. Now, Boris, in UK yesterday, you saw what happened. It looked like they were going a different way, but then he went a way of similar, I don't know exactly, but I would say we had a conversation yesterday similar to what we're doing. So a lot of people seem to think this is going to be, we are looking to save the maximum number of lives. Everything else is going to come back. A life is never going to come back, but everything else, our economy is going to come roaring back. You're going to know, we're going to know, we're going to all know that day. Somebody was asking about the day. When will you know? When will you know? We're going to know. All of a sudden, we're going to say, wow, that's looking good. That's looking good. That's looking good. And we're going to be on the other side of the curve. And that's a day that we look forward to.
He's right. The day will come. But right now, it's all about life preservation. And life preservation means focusing on protecting, but also increasingly it will be focusing on treating the more vulnerable members of our population, particularly the over 70 age group. Over 60 is in higher risk. Over 70 is in very high risk. I think the Italian data shows that if somebody is over 90, they have about almost a 20% chance of dying if they get this, which is that's very high, right? And that means if you have 5 people in their 90, you can do the math. Obviously, that's scary. So there are a lot of people who are deeply concerned about this, and at this moment in time, particularly if you have anybody in your life that's vulnerable, you understand what the risks are and what's going to. And you've heard this from the president himself. I mean, he's concerned about this. He's worried. So those who think that this is some media plot to destroy Trump, and I think that's, by the way, overblown by the people that do want to destroy Trump, but they're saying there's this consensus of people on the right who think that this was all a hoax. That's all been a lie. No one's thought that. We're just trying to make good decisions as we go through it. But here's what the president himself, if you think, because I got a lot of messages last week. Buck, I think you're drinking the Kool-Aid. Buck, I think you're too worried about this. Well, here's what the president of the United States, who doesn't back down to anybody and is not scared of anything, here's what he's saying about this. Play 15.
Last night, the FDA announced groundbreaking new policies to further increase testing, very substantially so. All states can now authorize tests developed and used within their borders in addition to the FDA. So the states are very much involved. They have been involved from the beginning, but we're stepping it up as much as we can, and the testing procedures are going well. And within a short period of time, all of the private labs will kick in. This has never been done before.
Okay, sorry, I actually called for the wrong clip. That's not on producer Mark. I meant Mark 14 on what he's asking everybody to do, but that was important on the testing too.
Our guidance yesterday urges Americans to take action for 15 days to help stem the outbreak. So it's a 15-day period. I guess now would say it's a 14-day period. It's 15 days from yesterday, and we're asking everyone to work at home if possible, postpone unnecessary travel, and limit social gatherings to no more than 10 people. by making shared sacrifices and temporary changes, we can protect the health of our people and we can protect our economy, because I think our economy will come back very rapidly. So it's 15 days from yesterday. We'll see what happens after that. If we do this right, our country and the world, frankly, but our country can be rolling again pretty quickly.
We need some optimism from the commander-in-chief, which is good, but you're hearing it from the man himself. This is go time right now, everybody.